Hello everyone, my name is Daily Manhwas and welcome to another video. In this video I will be recapping this manhwa called I Am the Strongest Boss. This story began many years ago when the demonic tower emerged and brought about the end of the world. With the appearance of the tower, humans awakened powers and began to fight against the demons that emerged from it. Generations of humans died and new generations emerged, and humans became increasingly stronger, firmly believing that justice would one day triumph over evil. Finally, a hero named Lin Fang was born. With an extremely powerful talent, an almost perfect wisdom, and astonishing luck, he managed to reach the highest floor of the demonic tower. This hero was the strongest person in humanity and the most promising to end all darkness to bring light to the world. Lin Fang reached the top floor of the tower, and while lost in his thoughts, he thought that this was the third time he had returned to the demonic tower. Unlike previous times, this time Lin Fang had improved all his attributes and abilities to the maximum level. Not only had he improved his attributes, but he had also obtained all the most powerful weapons and accessories known in this world. Upon opening the status window, the system congratulated him for reaching the peak of the demon tower. Lin Fang had obtained all the attributes, had 999k mana points, physical strength, and agility. As for armor, he was equipped with the supreme armor that could only be obtained after killing the dragon from the Kayan era. According to the indications of the system interface, cleaning the last floor of the demonic tower would put an end to everything. In recent years, thanks to the advice and help provided by the system interface, Lin Fang was able to reach the last floor of the tower. As this was his first time, the system had no records of the monsters that inhabited this floor. While Lin Fang was searching for information about monsters in the system interface, the team's archer told the wizard that Lin Fang was stunned staring at the air because he didn't know what to do. The wizard replied that Lin Fang was thinking about some girl. Hearing the conversation, he turned to his team members and explained that he was thinking about what to do after defeating the Demon King. Every time he was using the system interface, people around him would misinterpret and think he was crazy. But in reality, he was the only person in this world who was able to see the existence of the system interface, so whenever Lin Fang was using the system interface, he made up excuses to not appear like a lunatic. While he was lost in his thoughts, a person began to approach him. This person was a red-headed girl. Looking around, the girl was impressed and thought that this floor compared to the lower floors was beautiful. It was clean and full of precious crystals. Everyone started to move forward on the floor, and the wizard asked his companions if this was the highest level of the tower. The knight who wore a shield and bandages on his face also asked them why this place was so empty, and why there was no monster guarding if this floor was considered the last floor of the tower. The archer thought it was difficult to imagine what the boss of the top floor would be like, and the red-haired girl told the others that this place was completely different from the dark and terrifying style of the lower floors of the demon tower. Lin Fang drew everyone's attention and told them that angels had terrifying looks because they wanted to scare away the demons, while demons had beautiful looks because they wanted to tempt humans to lower their guard. He looked at his teammates and explained to them that inside the tower, the safer and more beautiful a floor seemed, the less they should take it lightly. After regressing 3 times, this was the first time Lin Fang had reached the top of the demonic tower, so he still had no information about the dangerous monsters that inhabited it. Lin Fang's companions thought that thanks to his leadership, they had been able to reach the top of the tower. Furthermore, when they saw him facing the monsters, they thought it was as if he had fought against them countless times, and as if he already knew the abilities and weaknesses of each of the monsters. While the others were talking, the red-haired girl approached Lin Fang and with a smile told him that with him by their side, they would definitely win. Lin Fang also smiled and explained to the girl that if they could join forces, they would defeat the floor boss and bring peace to the world. Just before he could finish the sentence, someone attacked the red-haired girl, causing her drops of blood to fall on his face. When he opened his eyes, he saw all his companions massacred. While the lifeless bodies of his companions were falling to the ground, he started to wonder what was happening. As he was trying to understand the situation, someone appeared from behind and started approaching him. This being was the Demon King, who began to smile as he was getting closer to Lin Fang. The Demon King stood right behind him, and he soon became aware of his demonic presence. He quickly spun around, and while he was unsheathing his sword, he began to wonder why he hadn't been able to feel the demon's presence as it was approaching him. Using all his strength, Lin Fang attacked the Demon King, but to his surprise, he blocked his attack using only one finger. The Demon King began to stare at him intently and with a malicious smile mocked him for having such a fragile sword. Upon hearing this, Lin Fang looked down at the ground and saw the broken blade of his sword and was shocked as the most powerful weapon known in the world had been split in half with just one finger. While he was lost in his thoughts, the Demon King approached him from behind and mocked him, asking where he was looking. Lin Fang quickly turned around and began to wonder who this powerful demon was. The Demon King punched him hard in the face, causing him to go flying and hit the wall. Due to the impact, Lin Xiao was gravely injured, and with his last strength, he looked towards the Demon King and began to wonder if this demon was the Demon King. The Demon King approached him and with a piercing look began to stare at Lin Xiao while his body was emitting a suffocating aura. Upon seeing this, he thought it was impossible for a monster to take human form. The Demon King explained to him that he was the reincarnation of humanity's fear of all things unknown, born from the dark side of humanity, and naturally had taken human form. With his last ounce of strength, Lin Xiao activated the maximum level ability called the Eye of Truth to see the Demon King's statistics. Using this ability, he was able to see the Demon King's life bar. Seeing the full life bar, he realized that his attack hadn't even scratched him. Lin Xiao, with all his stats maxed out, had hit the Demon King with all his might, but hadn't even been able to make a small scratch as the Demon King's life was 99 million points and his magical power was infinite. Looking a little closer at the Demon King's stat window, he noticed he had a passive ability called Unrestricted Vitality, a permanent and unconditional ability without restrictions. Looking at the magical power bar, he realized his magical power was infinite and not took a long time to come to the conclusion that the Demon King was invincible. The Demon King began to show his true nature, causing several warning windows to appear in front of Lin Xiao to inform him that his opponent was too strong and the odds of winning were nil. Lin Xiao was in shock as this was the first time the system interface had given him such dangerous warnings. He quickly reached the conclusion that he had no chance of winning against the Demon King. He panicked and began to think about what he should do now. While he was distracted, the Demon King started to reach his hand towards him and, sensing the presence of the system, grabbed one of the warning windows and shattered it into pieces. Upon seeing this, Lin Xiao was in shock. The Demon King quickly realized that Lin Xiao had a system, and came to the conclusion that he had been able to obtain all the weapons and accessories that could not be purchased with money. The Demon King smiled and thought that now that he had destroyed the system, it could no longer help him in any way. Lin Xiao panicked and asked the Demon King if he was able to see his system. The Demon King began to point at him with his finger and explained that he was not able to see the system, but that had not stopped him from destroying it, as he was invincible after all. The Demon King moved his finger towards Lin Xiao and prepared to deliver the final blow. Realizing this, Lin Xiao thought he was going to die and no longer had enough strength to do anything about it. Although this was not the first time he experienced death, compared to the previous times, this time he was more scared than ever before. Until now, he had not been able to think of a way to defeat the Demon King, but despite this, he was not willing to give up because even if he died this time, he would come back next time to face the Demon King again. Lin Xiao thought to himself that he just had to work harder because there was always a way to change the situation. Slowly his body began to rise and started to heal, and while this was happening, he thought that there was always a way and the next time he would defeat the Demon King. Upon opening his eyes, he saw that his body was being healed through a superior healing technique called infinite healing. He began to wonder why the Demon King was healing him, and as he looked at his hand, he realized that this was the best healing technique. It was an endless stream of healing energy flowing into his body. When looking ahead, he saw the Demon King using the healing technique on him. He was confused, so he asked him what his purpose was in healing him. The Demon King stared into his eyes and with a malicious smile asked him if he was a regressor. Upon hearing this, Lin Xiao was shocked. The Demon King realized that Lin Xiao was too familiar with the monsters on the lower floors. At first, he thought he had the ability to predict the future, but he quickly came to the conclusion that he could not predict the future because if he had, he would not have been so surprised to see him. The Demon King realized that Lin Xiao had traveled back in time several times. With a diabolical smile, he thought that if he killed him now, then he would only go back in time and fight him again, and if this happened several times, it would create an endless loop, and sooner or later he would be able to kill him. The Demon King revealed this to Lin Xiao, leaving him in shock, and upon seeing his expression, he realized that his theory was correct. The Demon King snapped his fingers and thought about killing Lin Xiao. He explained to him that the armor he was wearing was the strongest equipment that nobody could destroy except the Demon King himself. Little by little, the evil energy controlled by the Demon King began to envelop Lin Xiao's body, causing him to start changing shape. He explained to him that his healing technique would infinitely heal him so that he could never die. He also added that the armor he was wearing would turn into a prison that would bind him forever and never allow him to escape. Slowly his body began to change shape until it turned into an armchair. The Demon King approached the armchair and sat on it. He extended his finger from which a blue mana began to emerge that started to surround the corpses of Lin Xiao's teammates. Little by little, the corpses began to transform into precious blue crystals. In general terms, the protagonist always had the protagonist aura. However, everyone had felt like the protagonist at some point. So, how to know who the real protagonist was? This was a question that could not be answered by prophets, but could be answered by historians. While the Demon King was looking at the precious crystals, he thought about the final winner, which made him the protagonist, and this was a fact that only he could affirm since he was the most powerful boss. The next day, the news of Lin Xiao and his team's death spread everywhere, causing sadness among the people as they were one step away from victory. Battle after battle, humans firmly believed that justice would someday defeat evil. Although humanity had lost Lin Xiao, the best awakener, they were still not willing to give up as they planned to continue challenging the tower with the elite group to prevent the demons from entering the human world. At the same time, a boy named King Feng who was wearing knight armor was walking alongside his red-haired friend named Tian Tian. As they were heading towards the entrance of the dungeon, Tian Tian asked him if this wasn't the hidden S-class dungeon. They were in the underground city and heading towards the demonic tower that connected the entrance to the city. Dungeon entrances appeared randomly in every corner of the city, causing an endless stream of monsters to arrive at the dungeons from the demonic tower. Once the monsters emerged in the dungeons, they attacked and destroyed everything in their path. To confront this threat, the awakened members of humanity were in charge of searching for and closing the dungeon portals that appeared throughout the city to keep the civilians safe. Among the members of the awakened humans, only a very small number of elites attacked the demonic tower located outside the city. King Feng and Tian Tian belonged to the group of awakeners who were in charge of searching for and closing the dungeon portals. Both reached the entrance of the S-rank dungeon portal, and upon entering the portal, they arrived in a completely different world. Tian Tian started to get scared and asked King Feng if the S-rank monsters in this dungeon were going to drop the blood all, and also asked if they were really going to be able to defeat the Demon King with a law-type item. The blood all were rule-based artifacts. The rule of this artifact was that each attack caused at least 1 point of damage. King Feng replied to her that justice was going to defeat evil, and also asked her to be more aware. Tian Tian approached King Feng and praised him for being a genius, and also explained to him that he was still very young, so if he trained a couple more years he would be much stronger than Lin Xiao. She interlaced her hands and told him that she would always support him as he was her idol. After walking for several minutes, they arrived at the corpse of a monster, and on top of the corpse sat someone who was responsible for defeating the monster. King Feng, upon seeing that the monster was dead, began to wonder if the person responsible for the monster's death had obtained the blood all. The person who had killed the monster was none other than the Demon King himself, who thought his assumption had been correct as he believed there would always be more intelligent humans trying to use rule-based artifacts to defeat him. While he was holding the blood all, he thought he had done well to come here early to get the blood all before the humans. King Feng praised him for having done a good job and extended his hand, asking him to hand over the blood all. With a smile and a penetrating look, the Demon King looked at King Feng and responded that despite not knowing who he was, he wanted to steal the blood all from him. King Feng told him that he had to do it for the future of humanity. He also revealed his name by King Feng to the Demon King and asked if he had heard of him. While squeezing his fist, he explained to him that something so good would be more valuable in his hands than in anyone else's, also adding that he was doing all this to defeat the Demon King in the name of justice. He was unaware that the person in front of him was the very Demon King himself. He raised the blood all in the sky and began to activate it. Upon seeing this, King Feng immediately realized that he was in danger, and just before the Demon King's attack could hit him, he activated the absolute defense, known as the Crystal Cube. The rules of this object were no levels, absolute defense limited to a single person, and a 2-meter radius. Thanks to the Crystal Cube, he was able to avoid receiving the attack. After blocking the attack, he finally realized that he was the Demon King, since his magical power was too great to belong to a human. In the blink of an eye, the Demon King kidnapped Tian Tian, and while holding her by the neck with one hand, he looked at King Feng with a penetrating gaze and remembered that Bai King Feng was the mysterious genius known as the most promising to become the next Lin Xiao. The Demon King proposed that if he could destroy his crystal cube, then he would let him and his admirer leave this place. King Feng began to mistrust his words, and upon seeing this, the Demon King told him that he always kept his promises, and just before he could finish speaking, King Feng interrupted him, and while charging his fist with magic, he told Tian Tian that her sacrifice would be necessary for the world, and also promised her that once she died, he would take care of building a statue in her honor himself. In the blink of an eye, King Feng advanced towards the Demon King and attacked him, but to his surprise, he made a leap and dodged the attack as if nothing. The Demon King was surprised to see that King Feng had attacked him without hesitation, not caring at all about the life of his admirer. He realized that he had not fully understood human nature. While pointing at him, King Feng told him that the powerful hero was always alone, and often the sacrifice of those around him was inevitable. He also added that all of this was his fault. The Demon King left Tian Tian on the ground and thought that some people never learned. Through tears, Tian Tian asked King Feng why he was so ruthless with her if she was the only person who had followed him for so many years. She asked King Feng to leave her here and take advantage to escape using the Crystal Cube. But to her surprise, he refused to do it, and while unsheathing his sword he told her that the proud son of the heavens and the new star of humanity would never escape a situation like this. He drew his sword and took an offensive stance, telling the Demon King that justice always prevails over evil. He also added that he had a strong conviction and determination to win for humanity and for the future of the world. Upon hearing these words, the Demon King put his hand on his face and began to laugh heartily, and then, seeing that King Feng was not fleeing, he prepared to attack. Using his power, he began to envelop the area where King Feng was standing, causing the ground to break into pieces and King Feng to fall into the depths. King Feng tried to avoid falling, but no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to and began to wonder how a person as powerful as him had lost in this way. The last thing he saw was the Demon King bidding him goodbye with a smile. He mocked King Feng, telling him why doesn't he take a sip of lava when he is hungry, since a true hero like him should have had the conscience of sacrifice a long time ago. As King Feng was falling to the bottom, he thought he could not die this way, as he should not be the person who was supposed to sacrifice himself for humanity. While he was falling, he began to ask the Demon King to please let him go. The Demon King started walking away from the crevice while Tian Tian was lying on the ground trying to come to terms with the situation. Seeing that King Feng had died, she thought she was going to die too. But to her surprise, when she looked towards the Demon King, she saw that he was entering the portal to go back to the human world. Seeing this, she became confused and started to wonder why the Demon King had left without looking back. To clear her doubts, she asked him if he was not going to kill her. As he was entering the portal, he reminded her of the words he had said himself, that as soon as the cube was destroyed, he would let them both out, and now that the cube had been destroyed, he must keep his promise, as the great Demon King never broke his promises. He looked at Tian Tian with a murderous look and revealed to her that King Feng was not going to make it out of here, but the next time they met, he would take care of her. Upon hearing this, Tian Tian was left speechless and could not believe that the Demon King had spared her life. He began to climb the stairs that connected the portal to the human world, and after several minutes, he entered the human world and took on a human form to avoid attracting the attention of the awakened. Thanks to this form, he blended in like any other human among the crowd. Now that he was in the human world, he headed to the headquarters of the Association of Awakened Humans. Upon entering the building, he went to reception where he was greeted by a girl who instantly fell in love with his beauty. She asked the Demon King if he wanted to join the Awakeners Association. Her partner also fell in love instantly and explained that the demons were becoming more aggressive and there were rumors that they were coming to the city. That's why they welcomed all the powerful awakened beings to join them. The receptionists asked him for his name, rank, and ability so they could help him register. The Demon King pondered for a moment, and after several seconds he told them his name was Bai King Feng, a hidden genius that everyone had heard of. With a pleasant smile, he told them that it was a pleasure for him to join the Association of Awakened Humans. At the same time, in the hall of the 7 elders of the Awakened Human Association headquarters, a person wearing a suit approached the 7 elders. One of the 7 elders told the others that out of the 7 elders, only 6 were left now. Another elder explained to them that he had never imagined that the elder Lin Fang, who had the power of regression, would fail in his attempt to challenge the Demon Tower. The man who had gone to the 7 elders told them that as long as the Demon King was inside the Demon Tower, he would receive the blessing of unconditional unrestricted vitality and infinite mana from the Demon Tower. He also added that they could no longer allow human heroes to continue sacrificing themselves, and it was time to come up with another plan. He revealed to them that he had already called on all humanity to refrain from challenging the Demon Tower. The man thought that everyone should search for objects that could seal the Demon Tower, as they only needed to seal the Demon King and the demon creatures inside the tower forever. He wanted everyone to do their best so that the demons could never invade human cities through the dungeons, and if they achieved this goal, human cities would be safe forever. One of the 7 elders explained to him that he had already summoned a chosen one from the parallel world called Earth. One of the 7 elders was a woman, and she was the one who had invoked a chosen one from the parallel world. She asked the man in the suit to keep this a secret, since even the traveler did not know that she had called him to save this world. She also added that saving parallel worlds had always been the fate of the travelers. She extended her hand and explained to everyone that at this moment, the soul of the traveler resided in the body of Lin Xiao's younger brother, named Lin Fang, and since he had arrived in this world he had been acting cautiously and had unique thoughts. Lin Fang was now the leader of a small but strong group and was advancing towards the dungeon in search of artifacts that could seal the demonic tower. While one of the elders was drinking alcohol, he told them that on the full moon night of last month, he had done a divination for Lin Fang. The elder pointed towards the sky with his finger, and as he became increasingly drunk, he told them that the hexagram showed that soon the traveler would find the artifact to seal the demonic tower. With a smile, he explained to them that for this reason the demon tower would soon be sealed. Several hours later, the meeting ended and the elder left the chamber of the 7 elders, and as he was heading to his room, the receptionist began to follow him and addressed the elder as the prophet sir and asked him if Lin Fang was really going to find the artifact that could seal the demon tower. She also asked him if this way the demon tower would be sealed forever. She interlaced her hands and thought that if Lin Fang managed to seal the tower, humans would finally be safe. The old man approached the receptionist and asked her if she had ever thought that if the Demon King was not inside the demonic tower when it was sealed, and instead was wandering outside in a human city. The old man explained that if this were to happen, then sealing the demonic tower would be useless. The receptionist then asked him what they had to do. The old man smiled and playfully smacked the receptionist on the bum. As he was walking away from her, he began to laugh loudly and told the woman that he was just joking because it was not possible for the Demon King to leave the tower. He took out his bottle of alcohol, and as he brought it to his mouth to drink, he explained to her that if the Demon King left the demon tower, he would no longer have the blessings of the tower, which would make his strength equivalent to that of a superior level human expert. And if he left the tower, once his identity was discovered, he would be besieged and killed by the humans immediately. He extended his hand and explained to the receptionist that either the demon would stay in the demonic tower and be sealed for all eternity, or would leave the demonic tower and be attacked by infinite humans until death. If Lin Fang found the object to seal the demonic tower, then the humans would win, and this is what his divination power had shown him. He started laughing out loud at the thought that Lin Fang would find the sealing object tonight as soon as possible. Seeing the old man starting to get drunk, the receptionist decided to leave with the excuse that she had to do an important task. As the old man was opening the door of his room, he thought that women nowadays had changed a lot, and while he was looking at the time, he thought that Lin Fang should be returning soon. Upon fully opening the door to his room, he saw a boy sitting in one of the armchairs. Seeing this, the old man asked the boy what he was doing in his room. This boy was the Demon King who was lost in his thoughts. Upon seeing the old man, he introduced himself as Bai Qingfeng, the Awakener who had just joined the association. The old man closed the door to his room and told him that he had scared him a lot, thinking that he would be the new hidden genius who had recently joined. He began to approach his armchair, and the Demon King thanked him for flattering him and also added that as long as they were able to get rid of the Demon King, it would be an honor for him. The old man asked him to sit down and stop being so polite. He sat down, and he put his hand on his chest and told the old man that he had heard that among the 7 elders of the association, he was the only one who could predict the future. He also explained that he had come to the Awakeners Association to ask him to predict the future of the Demon King. The old man closed his eyes and asked him to stop thinking so lightly about the issue of eliminating the Demon King. He also added that as if he could predict the Demon King's future, then the light of humanity would have been him and not Lin Xiao. He explained to him that his divination art required a full moon night, and also he had to touch the person involved, and only in this way would he be able to predict his future. At that moment, the Demon King got up and grabbed the old man by the neck to ask him if today was not a full moon night. The old man mocked him, asking if he was stupid or pretending. He explained to him that the problem was not the full moon, but touching the person involved. He also added that he had no combat skills, so he couldn't go to the demonic tower, and if he couldn't go to the tower, then he couldn't find the Demon King to do a divination. He mocked him, asking if he was going to ask the Demon King to come and fetch him. At that moment, the old man finally realized that the boy in front of him was not Qingfeng, but was in fact the Demon King himself. He grabbed the old man by the neck again, causing the great divination art to be activated. The old man's skill revealed to him that he was going to be murdered by a human next winter. The Demon King activated the skill called mind reading and read the old man's mind. Upon seeing the divination that the elder's skill had made, he began to strangle him and asked if the great prophet's divinations were accurate. While the old man was being strangled, he lied to him, telling him that they were not. He also asked the Demon King not to murder him since he could be useful to him. The Demon King simply smiled, and while his body was surrounded by evil energy, he asked the old man if he could guess that tonight he would be killed by the Demon King himself. Upon hearing this, the old man panicked and realized that his death was very near. This story happened in a transmigration comic. It was a story about a boy from the modern world who transmigrated to a parallel world. He went from being a waste to fighting monsters and leveling up, acting with style and mocking arrogant characters. In the end, on a stormy day, that waste defeated the Demon King. He was that waste of the earth, living in the lowest and poorest level of the planet. One day, like any other, while he was reading that novel, he didn't pay attention to the traffic light and was run over by a truck when crossing a pedestrian crossing, just like the prologue of any transmigration story. After dying, he transmigrated into the world of the novel he was reading and became one of the characters. The second son of the Lin family, the hope of humanity, Lin Xiao was his older brother. He transmigrated into the body of his younger brother, the untalented Lin Fang, who was hedonistic and evil and had always lived in his older brother's shadow. This was a memory he had of this character. However, now everything was going to change. After transmigrating into Lin Fang's body, he went to visit his father and asked him to assign a strong troop to him as he knew the location of the map that recorded the sealing object. As he was familiar with the novel's plot and had an omniscient perspective, he knew the location of the map that recorded the object that could seal the demonic tower. Thanks to this, he was able to obtain the map that recorded the object that could seal the demonic tower. He led his team to the main room of the headquarters of the Awakeners Association, and his team was formed by Tian Tian and 3 other members. He thought that even though his brother Lin Xiao was dead, the true protagonist of this story had not yet appeared. Now it was time for him to save this world and become the true hero of this world. He looked at his partner named Xiaoya and told her that with him there, they would be able to obtain the sealed object. Xiaoya simply sighed and looked away. She was the icy beauty, and Lin Fang's previous life, he didn't even dare to dream of being close to such a charming beauty. But instead in this life, she was his fiancée. Not only did he have a girl next to him, but he also had Tian Tian whom he had found halfway. She was like a rabbit as she was always scared and was always looking for him to save her. While they were walking, a man passing by on the side started whistling, causing Tian Tian to get scared. Lin Fang petted Tian Tian's head and told her that they were at the headquarters, and here no monster could enter, so she was safe here. He said goodbye to his team and told them that he was going to look for the great prophet to have a chat with him. All the members of his team said goodbye to him except for Xiaoya. Once he became the hero who sealed the magic tower, he could get whatever he wanted, so now he didn't care about women anymore. At the same time, Xiaoya and Tian Tian went to the reception to make a service transaction. With a pleasant smile, the receptionist asked them what type of service they wanted to have. Xiaoya replied that she wanted to recommend a person to join the association. She introduced Tian Tian to the receptionist and explained that she was rescued by Lin Fang while they were exploring a dungeon. She also revealed that she was the only person who had seen the Demon King and had survived. She also asked the receptionist to allow her to join the association. Tian Tian approached and placed her hand on her chest and with a smile asked the receptionist if she knew Bai Qingfeng, a well-known hidden genius. She also added that she was his only follower. She explained to them that Qingfeng and she encountered the Demon King in the dungeon, and the Demon King killed Qingfeng, but somehow she managed to escape, and later she met Lin Fang and Xiaoya and joined their team. The receptionist explained to her that Qingfeng had just joined the association and was alive, and right now he had gone to visit the Great Prophet. Upon hearing this, both Tian Tian and Xiaoya were left open-mouthed. At the same time, in the old man's room, the Demon King returned to his original form, and while he was strangling the old man, he asked him if he had already guessed that this was his final night. With his last strength, the old man begged him to spare his life, and in exchange he would be willing to work under his command. The Demon King began to get bored of listening to the old man so much, as he used to think that all humans were like Lin Xiao, full of courage, justice, and strength, but little by little he was realizing that he was not yet familiar with humanity and needed to improve his knowledge about his enemies. He never thought he would find a miserable existence like that of the old man among humans. The worry in his heart had diminished greatly, and as a token of appreciation for his performance, he decided to send him to the other world. With a smile, he began to choke the old man even more using his demonic power, and in a matter of seconds, he lost his life. After finishing off the old man, the Demon King left his room and began to transform back into human form so as not to attract attention. He thought that if he returned to the demonic tower and Lin Fang obtained the sealing object as the prophecy had said, he would be trapped forever inside the demonic tower. But on the other hand, if he went to stop Lin Fang, then not only could he fail, but he could also be eliminated by a hero as indicated by the divination. He didn't know what to do to avoid ending up dead or sealed inside the demonic tower. After several minutes he arrived at the main room, and while he was looking at the floor he felt indignant and thought that no matter what happened, it was still not too risky for him to leave the demon tower. Now that he had obtained the information of the prophecy, he decided to return first to the demon tower and thought that perhaps later on he could find a way to get rid of the prophecy. He lifted his head, and while he was looking ahead he remembered that around this area there was a back door to exit. But at that moment, someone touched his shoulder. The person who touched him was none other than Lin Fang. He asked him who he was and why he had never seen him before. The Demon King tensed up and thought he had been discovered, but then he calmed down and with a smile replied that he was the Awakener who had recently joined the association. Upon hearing this, Lin Fang was surprised, and while pointing to his badge, he explained that the badge he was wearing was something that only S-rank Awakeners could wear. He also asked him if he was really that powerful. He advised him to join his team as they were going to retrieve the object that could seal the demonic tower. Upon hearing this, the Demon King asked him what object he was talking about. He explained that his name was Lin Fang, and although he was not known now, he would soon be known by everyone. He thought King Feng seemed talented, so he asked him why he didn't join his team. Upon hearing the name Lin Fang, the Demon King smiled and without hesitation agreed to join his team. He had accepted without hesitation as he wanted to find out if the prophecy of the Great Prophet was true. While Lin Fang was accompanying the Demon King to his subordinates, he told him that he was lucky to have met a leader like him. He asked him to just wait, as soon his name would be recognized all over the world. If he followed him obediently and stayed alert, then he wouldn't mistreat him in the future. He also explained that he had even saved a beauty during his last mission, King Feng's only companion. He also added that he had heard that she was the only person who had managed to survive after encountering the Demon King. The Demon King simply stayed listening, and to not seem suspicious, he asked him if she was really the only person who had seen the Demon King and had survived. Lin Fang smiled and replied that it was correct, and also explained that the girl's name was Lai Tian, and she had already become one of the members of his team, so they were going to see her soon. Upon hearing this, the Demon King began to step away stealthily from him. Lin Fang turned towards him and asked him where he was going. The Demon King replied that suddenly he had remembered that the sow in his village was about to give birth, so he needed to return to help with postnatal care. Lin Fang was puzzled to hear the excuse that the Demon King had invented. While he was distancing himself from him, Tian appeared next to Xiaoya and began to greet them. Upon seeing Tian, the Demon King quickly turned around so that she would not recognize him. Lin Fang greeted them back and quickly approached the Demon King to explain that being surrounded by beauties every day was quite tiring, but he had no other choice, since the girls liked to be by his side. Once Tian approached the Demon King, she immediately recognized him. Upon seeing this, the Demon King prepared to finish her off before she revealed his true identity to everyone. With a murderous look, he stared at Tian and thought that this was the worst scenario that could have taken place. He turned to her and with a smile greeted her. To his surprise, instead of exposing him, she hugged him and explained that she had heard he was well and had escaped from the Demon King. Lin Fang looked at Tian and was surprised and began to wonder if he was really by King Feng. He then remembered that in the original novel, he had died. Tian looked into the Demon King's eyes and explained that she had been worried about him since they separated in the dungeon. She also added that since then she had only been thinking about when she would see him again. The Demon King also looked into her eyes and realized that she knew he was not by King Feng but the Demon King. She approached the Demon King and thanked him for having saved her from the demons last time. She also added that she was an ungrateful person, so she wanted to return the favor with kindness. So from now on, she decided to be his follower, as she admired strong people and always paid her debts. The Demon King couldn't help but smile at the thought of a human admiring the Demon King and wanting to repay the favor with kindness. This was the first time he saw a human who wanted to seek refuge with the demons, so it was very intriguing for him. He praised Tian for being a wise person and also promised her that he would not mistreat her. Upon hearing this conversation, Lin Fang got angry and approached the Demon King to remind him that he was the leader of the team. Just before he could finish speaking, Xiaoya appeared and interrupted him, and while holding her chin told everyone that she had heard that he was the rumored genius awakened by King Feng. She also introduced herself as Laia. Seeing this, Lin Fang tried to stop her as he did not want him to steal his beloved fiancée. She approached them and asked what the Demon King looked like. Tian and the Demon King explained to her that he was fierce and terrifying, and also seemed like a bad person. The three of them started laughing, making Lin Fang start to get even more angry and thought that he was becoming more and more annoying. While looking at the Demon King with contempt, he thought that according to the original story, Bai King Feng died at the hands of the Demon King at the beginning of the novel. Tian was the only person who had seen the Demon King before. He began to question if his actions were causing the butterfly effect. To clarify his doubts, he planned to ask the Great Prophet about King Feng. While he was lost in thought, the receptionist came running towards them and revealed that something bad had happened to the Great Prophet. Lin Fang quickly turned to the receptionist and asked for an explanation. She began pointing at the ceiling and revealed to them that the Great Prophet had been killed, and also added that he had been alive half an hour ago. She also asked Lin Fang to corner the association and investigate who the Great Prophet had met within that half hour. Upon hearing the news of the death of the Great Prophet, Tian, Xiaoya, and Lin Fang were left in shock. He turned to the receptionist and asked her who the people were that had been with the Prophet in the past half hour. Just before the receptionist could answer his question, the Demon King smiled and, while looking at Lin Fang, revealed to everyone that the only people who had been with the Great Prophet were him and his captain Lin Fang. Upon hearing this, Lin Fang got furious and told him to stop talking nonsense. He also explained to everyone that he hadn't had the chance to meet him, and that the only person he saw acting suspiciously by the door when he arrived was King Feng. At that moment, he realized something and quickly pointed to the Demon King and explained to everyone that he was the one who had killed the great prophet, and also added that since from the beginning he knew there was something wrong with him. Xiaoya appeared and grabbed Lin Fang's hand and asked him to calm down because he was being too hasty. Without thinking twice, Lin Fang grabbed Xiaoya's hand and forcefully pushed it aside, causing her to fall to the ground. He told everyone that they had been deceived by him, and the person they had in front of them was not Bai Qingfei. Lin Fang gathered momentum and quickly moved towards the Demon King to attack him, telling him that no matter how much he could deceive others, he would never be able to deceive him. Upon hearing this, the Demon King couldn't help but smile, thinking that Lin Fang was a quite interesting human. He struck the Demon King with all his might, but to his surprise, he dodged the attack as if nothing happened and appeared behind him. While preparing to strike him on the back of his neck, he mocked him by saying that trash that couldn't even compare to Lin Xiao was not worthy of speaking to him in this way. Lin Fang was terrified and began to wonder how he had dodged his attack so quickly. The Demon King gave him a strong blow to the back of his head, causing him to fall to the ground and be unable to get up. He began to wonder how a simple awakener was so strong. While he was distracted, the Demon King approached him and gave him a strong stomp on the face, causing his face to hit the ground. Tian Tian helped Xiaoya up from the ground, and upon seeing the incredible strength of the Demon King, Xiaoya was left speechless. While on the other hand, Tian Tian couldn't help but feel happy thinking that she had made the right choice in following the strongest person. As the Demon King was stepping on his head, he looked at him with a piercing gaze and asked him to calm down. He thought it was quite strange since he didn't know how Lin Fang was so sure that he was not Bai Qingfei. While he was stepping on his head, he told everyone that he had previously heard about Lai Xiao's younger brother, who they called the hope of humanity, named Lin Fang. As he stared at him with a penetrating gaze, he told him that he was worthless and talentless. He also added that now that he had seen him in person, he thought he was worse than he had imagined. Lin Fang began to get angry and asked who he was calling garbage, now that he had finally had the experience of transmigration, receiving overwhelming buffs and becoming a person above the others. He was not going to allow this kind of insults. Xiaoya appeared and explained to the Demon King that Lin Fang had not attacked him on purpose and asked him not to hurt him. She also added that he used to be an honest person, but had recently become a bit impulsive. While the Demon King was distracted listening to Xiaoya, Lin Fang took advantage of the moment to pull out a weapon, thinking that he was no longer worthless. He quickly got up from the ground and attacked the Demon King with the S-rank devastating Soul Claw. To his surprise, the Demon King realized his intentions and quickly dodged it. When looking a little closer at the devastating Soul Claw, he asked him why a scum like him had an S-class weapon. He thought to himself that although a normal S-rank awakener wasn't a match for him one-on-one in a fight, he didn't remember the list of human geniuses having the name Lin Fang. As they were fighting, a person in a suit appeared and using his powers, ordered them both to stop fighting. Immediately, both the Demon King and Lin Fang moved away. Lin Fang looked towards the man in a suit and began to wonder why his magic had suddenly disappeared. The Demon King also looked towards the man in a suit and realized that he had used rule-based power. This person's body was enveloped in blue magic. He was the president of the Awakener Association called Awakened Power. His power allowed him to make all supernatural power disappear within his domain. The president looked at them and reminded them that each member of the association was a valuable human resource to fight against the demons. He also asked them why they were fighting each other. The Demon King looked at the president of the association and got nervous because now he was not inside the demonic tower, so he no longer had the buffs of unrestricted vitality, unlimited mana, ignoring all the rules and the rest of the buffs. Seeing that this behavior was dangerous, he decided he would be more careful in the future. Quickly, the Demon King approached the president and bowed his head before him to apologize for causing inconvenience. He also decided to take full responsibility and promised him that it would not happen again. But at that moment, Lin Fang approached the president and while pointing at the Demon King, clenched his fist and asked him why he hadn't stopped him when he had hit him, and also asked him why now he had decided to intervene when he was about to take his revenge. He inquired as well if he was taking his side on purpose and also if he thought he was still a piece of trash. While the Demon King was looking at the ground, he began to wonder if Lin Fang really was a genius who had been able to obtain an S-class weapon and a map of a divine object, as he thought this was very rare since he did not have the intelligence or character for it. The president asked Lin Fang to stop talking nonsense and also explained that he never took anyone's side and everything he did was for the future of humanity. Lin Fang approached him and while pointing at him with his finger, he asked if he really thought he was going to believe his nonsense. He decided not to argue with the president and left, and as he was leaving, he told everyone that those who waste him had no idea of his true value. Soon he would obtain the sealing object, and he would seal the demonic tower and show everyone who was the chosen one who would save the world. The president sighed and decided not to argue with him. He then first put one hand on the Demon King's shoulder and then put the other one, leaving him confused. He asked if he was really Bai Qingfeng, and he also praised him for not only being a strong person, but also for being polite and calm. With a pleasant smile, the Demon King thanked him and began to wonder why all humans liked him. The president looked him in the eyes and explained that he had already conducted a preliminary investigation into the death of the great prophet and had found evidence of demonic power at the crime scene. So he concluded that a demon had escaped from the dungeon and killed the great prophet, which meant that his death had nothing to do with humans. He also added that as for the final verdict, it would require a detailed investigation. He clenched his fist and with a smile explained that the search for the divine object was imminent, so he asked the Demon King to go with Lin Fang, as he also carried the future of humanity on his shoulders. The Demon King smiled and replied that understood, although deep down he thought he supported humanity but the other way around. The president left and told the Demon King to keep working hard, as one day the future of humanity would rest in the hands of young people like him. Xiaoya also decided to left and told him that she was going to take a look at Lin Fang as he had been irritated lately. Just before she could left, the Demon King grabbed her arm and asked her to wait a moment, leaving her confused. He looked her in the eyes and apologized for asking, then asked her why Lin Fang's personality had changed recently and if he had become different from before. Deep down, he started to wonder if she would become suspicious of him because he had asked about Lin Fang's personal information so suddenly. Xiaoya started to blush, and seeing this, the Demon King let go of her arm and while touching his head with one hand. He apologized to her and also explained to her that he was worried about Lin Fang and for this reason he had suddenly become so impulsive and had made a scene with him. He also expressed his feeling of regret. He thought to himself that he should be more cautious since he couldn't allow them to discover his true identity. Upon hearing the words of the Demon King, Xiaoya decided to reveal him what had happened to Lin Fang. She thought to herself that Bai Qingfeng was a good person since he was even worried about her fiancé. She explained to him that Lin Fang used to be an honest and cowardly trash, but some time ago, his personality suddenly changed when he woke up one day. After transmigrating, Lin Fang began to look at himself in the mirror and while touching his head, he started to wonder if he was inside the world of the novel. Upon looking at himself in the mirror, he realized that he had transmigrated to a worthless secondary character. Xiaoya explained to the Demon King that Lin Fang started talking about strange things, something about books, transmigration, cheat codes, and the parallel world. She also added that upon hearing these words she thought he was half asleep. After that day, suddenly he became a completely different person. Not only did become striking and bold, but he also obtained the location of some first-class items and weapons, and even knew the location of divine objects. She thought it was as if he had the power to speak and get anything he wanted. After transmigrating, Lin Fang obtained a Class S weapon and thought it was exactly as written in the novel. He also began to wonder if he had become the Providence's son in this world. Even if Lin Fang was weak, by relying on those S-class weapons and objects, he recently managed to reach the threshold of the S-rank hunter. Xiaoya looked at the Demon King and explained that the elders of both families had said that Lin Fang had received an enlightenment, and also added that she thought he had awakened some incredible ability and refused to reveal it to anyone. Upon hearing the words enlightenment and awakened, the Demon King looked down and thought that this was not so simple, since despite Lin Fang knowing that he was not Qingfeng, he did not dare to tell everyone the reason why he was so sure. With Lin Fang's impulsive personality, he began to wonder what kind of motive would make him know something but not dare to tell others, and even refuse to tell his own family and his fiancée. He smiled and thought that this could only happen if he was not the original Lin Fang, as he would be seeking death if he told the truth to the family. Parallel world, changes in personality and knowing everything could only mean that the true Lin Fang had been possessed. As he was lost in his thoughts, the ground began to shake and Xiaoya started to wonder what was happening. At the same time, outside, a Class A demon ran out of the dungeon and entered the city, and seeing that no one was stopping it, Lin Fang decided to confront it. He was battling the Class A monster called Demon Corpse Canine, and was using an S-class weapon called Raging Flame's Frost Flying Sword. While he was staring the monster in the eyes, he began to wonder why an insignificant Class A demon dared to unleash a massacre in his presence. He leaped and started attacking the monster using magical crystals, then drew a Class S sword named Meteor Star Sword, and while holding both swords he told everyone that he was the hero who would protect them all. He started using his magic, and while his eyes were shining and his body was surrounded by magic, he told everyone that everyone's attention should be on him. Gaining momentum, he attacked the monster with a powerful slash. The other Awakeners were amazed to see that Lin Fang was capable of facing a Class A demon on his own. All the people nearby started cheering for him. After several minutes, the Demon King arrived at the place where Lin Fang was fighting against the demon. While looking at the demon, he smiled, thinking that the corpse canine was a stray animal in the city that was slaughtered by humans. After its death, its resentment clung to the demonic energy in the demonic tower and condensed into a Class A demon. It was a rather rare species of demon, so most humans were not familiar with it, and it also had a distinctive characteristic that no one knew. In the blink of an eye, Lin Fang ended the life of the corpse canine using his S-class swords to deliver precise cuts. The corpse canine fell to the ground and all the people began to praise Lin Fang. But what no one knew was that once the corpse canine received enough attacks, it would feign its own death. The Demon King could not help but smile as he saw that now the corpse canine would rejuvenate as an even stronger demon, reaching the level of an S-class demon. After defeating the corpse canine, Lin Fang thought he had won and began to sheath his sword. Seeing the demon fall, everybody started praising Lin Fang, and as his name echoed everywhere, the Demon King simply stood there watching. Hearing the compliments, Lin Fang thought that all he had done was overpower a Class A demon, and seeing the crowd admiring him, he believed that once he sealed the demonic tower, his name would be known to everyone. While he was moving away from the corpse canine corpse, it slowly began to rise, and upon realizing this, Lin Fang started to feel immense terror. The corpse canine corpse began to mutate, causing its legs and teeth to grow suddenly. After mutating, the demon started to look at him with a murderous gaze. The corpse canine mutated into a SS-class demonic hell cannoneer, a name that would be known worldwide. Lin Fang looked at the demon and began to wonder how it was still alive after receiving so many attacks. The demon opened its mouth and released a demonic breath towards Lin Fang. This breath was so powerful that it made him recoil several meters. Due to the difference in magic, he was sent flying and fell several meters back, and upon seeing that the hero who had defeated the monster had been injured, the people around began to flee. With his last strength, he stood up and began to think that in no way had the demon been able to push him back with just one blow. In the blink of an eye, the demon approached him and began to look at him with a murderous look. Lin Fang realized that this demon was not a Class A demon, but rather a legendary Class SS demon. Quickly, Xiaoya approached him and helped him stand up. She asked him to lean on her so they could escape together. While she was carrying the wounded Lin Fang, the demon began to approach them as he had not planned on letting them escape so easily. Seeing this, Xiao started crying and thought that her death was near. But just before the demon could attack them, the Demon King jumped and quickly advanced towards them. In the blink of an eye, he reached the demon and thought that Lin Fang could not die yet, as he still needed him to find the divine object and destroy it. With a murderous look, he stared at the demon and began to prepare a powerful attack. He attacked the demon in the muzzle by unleashing a powerful beam. Upon seeing this, both Xiaoya and Lin Fang were left speechless. The Demon King stared at the demon and began to speak in the demon language. He asked if he did not recognize his own master. Upon realizing that the human in front of him was the very Demon King himself, the demonic hell cannoneer began to tremble in fear and fell to his knees before him. With a murderous look, the Demon King ordered him to leave this place. And without a second thought, the demon began to escape from the city and return to the dungeon. Upon seeing that the demon was fleeing, the people were confused and began to wonder why the SS-ranked demon had been scared upon seeing King Feng. One of the men asked his friend why the demon had suddenly become so strong. His friend replied that the demon had not become stronger, but rather Lin Fang had become weaker. People began to think that King Feng was amazing and came to the conclusion that the demon had fled upon realizing how powerful he was. While Xiaoyu was carrying Lin Fang, she thanked the Demon King and also asked how he had scared that demon so easily. The Demon King smiled and replied that it was because the demon seemed strong on the outside but was actually weak on the inside. He thought to himself that saving Lin Fang had been good, since if he felt grateful like Tian Tian, then in the future he would not attack him. But to his surprise, instead of thanking him for saving him, Lin Fang approached him and grabbed his neck and asked him if he had done it on purpose. He thought that there must be some kind of special secret about the Class A demon, and he also thought that he had used a special approach to deal with the demon. He asked if he knew that the demon was going to become stronger suddenly. He thought that he knew this and decided not to warn him to make him look ridiculous. He looked into the Demon King's eyes and asked if he was happy after taking all the glory. He thought that he must be enjoying the feeling of everyone admiring him. He began blaming him for everything and started insulting him, calling him scum, since he prioritized showing off in front of everyone instead of saving his comrade's life. He thought that for this reason he had stood still and watched him be hit by the demon. The Demon King began to look him in the eyes and realized that not all humans deserve to be saved. Lin Fang continued to insist that everything was his fault, and little by little the Demon King's patience began to wear thin, until he grabbed his hand tightly and made him let go of his neck. He looked at Lin Fang and asked him what kind of special secret he thought the demon had. He also added that he was just a normal Class A demon. He also added that the person unable to do something was him, since he failed to be the hero, and now he was here looking for excuses to avoid feeling ashamed. He also added that he was already starting to get tired and didn't want to continue the act he was putting on. Upon hearing this, Lin Fang started to get angry, and just before he could respond to the Demon King, the receptionist who was next to Tian Tian and an awakener asked them why Lin Fang was so grumpy and how he could blame others without discrimination. She also added that King Fang was the person who had saved his life. The awakener began to look at him with contempt and told them that he was accusing others without any reason and actually had no evidence. Tian Tian explained to them that from what she had seen, he had failed to act cool, so he was behaving this way to regain his pride. Upon hearing this, the receptionist told them that the great prophet was dead, and the only people who had been at the scene were King Fang and Lin Fang, and now that she was observing Lin Fang's behavior, she thought he was the culprit. Tian Tian looked towards the Demon King and the others and asked if Lin Fang had suddenly become so strong because he had used some kind of forbidden immortal art. Upon hearing this, Lin Fang thought that everyone was foolish as they couldn't even see through the disguise King Fang was wearing, and realized that gradually all public opinion was turning in his favor. The Demon King let go of his hand. Upon seeing this, he began to wonder what he was doing. The Demon King smiled, and as he extended his hand, he told him that he believed that everything that had just happened was just a misunderstanding, and now that he had calmed down, they could make amends and reconcile. Upon hearing this, Lin Fang began to get angry as he realized that he was acting innocent after gaining an advantage in the situation. But instead of continuing to argue, he simply took his hand and thought about competing against him to see who was better at pretending. He stood up and explained that he had lost his temper because he had been attacked by that demonic dog. He also apologized for his rude attitude and thanked him for saving him. He closed his eyes and with a pleasant smile asked him to please take care of him in the future. The Demon King also smiled and replied that there was no need to be so polite as he should be the one thanking him. He approached Lin Fang's ear and with an evil look thanked him, since now no one thought he was the guilty one for the murder. He also revealed that he was the person who had killed the great prophet. Upon hearing this, Lin Fang began to get even more furious and finally realized his true intentions. He quickly moved away from him and prepared to hit him. The Demon King simply raised both hands and began to smile. Just before Lin Fang could hit him, Xiaoya intervened and took him by the elbow, asking him not to make a scene as everyone was watching. She also asked him why he suddenly was so focused on King Fang. Lin Fang looked at Xiaoya and then decided to relax. He made her release his elbow and answered her that he was okay. As he was getting closer to the Demon King, he began to wonder who he was and what his goal was. He remembered that someone as strong as Bai King Fang had not been mentioned in the novel, and thought that there was no way the original story of the novel could go wrong. He began to look at the Demon King with anger since he didn't know his true identity. The Demon King simply smiled and, as he let out his demonic aura, he thought that at first he was only going to snatch the sealing object from him, but if he became an obstacle, then he wouldn't hesitate to take his life. After all, if the sealing object was destroyed, then all of humanity would perish sooner or later. Both began to look aggressively at each other and the Demon King thought that those who were bothersome had to die. The next day in a cafe, a waitress served tea to the Demon King and Xiaoya, and with a smile she thanked him for saving her the previous day. The Demon King took the teacup and replied that there was no need to say thanks. In reality, he didn't even remember saving her. Xiaoya closed her eyes and explained that soon the team would obtain the sealing object. And she also added that Lin Fang had never allowed others to see the map that recorded the location of the divine object, but he had told her that the divine object was in the south. She looked away and started to blush, and added that the journey would be long, and she hoped he could get along with Lin Fang. She asked him please to overlook his behavior. She also explained that she had known him since they were young, and in fact he was a good person. While the Demon King was mixing the tea, he thought sadly that Lin Fang was no longer the same. While bringing the teacup to his mouth, he thought that everything was very ironic, since a dirty soul from a parallel world took the body of an innocent human from this world. And now he was enjoying the love and concern of a lover that didn't belong to him. And in this world he was talking about becoming the hero who would protect the world. After taking a sip of tea, he immediately spat it out, leaving Xiaoya confused. Quickly, he cleaned his mouth and realized that the taste was very disgusting. He thought it was difficult to understand the taste of humans. While cleaning his mouth, he asked Xiaoya if she had ever thought that her fiancé Lin Fang was sick and that's why he had suddenly changed. With a wicked smile, he asked her if she wanted her fiancé to return to how he used to be. He revealed to her that in the south there was an object, which could be obtained at the same time they were on the mission, and that object would be able to make Lin Fang return to how he was before. He thought to himself that this way he would definitely obtain the sealing object. Xiaoya stood up and placed both her hands on the table and asked him if it could really make Lin Fang return to how he originally was. With a pleasant smile, the Demon King replied that yes. At the same time, outside while Lin Fang was strolling through the city, he thought that the current plot was only in the previous stage and the real story had not yet happened. However, regarding this prelude, he clearly remembered that King Fang had not come back to life, but the great prophet had indeed died before the beginning of the story. He put his hand on his chin and thought that yesterday when he first saw King Fang, he was acting suspiciously and seemed to be fleeing. But after explaining about the sealing object to him, he suddenly agreed to join his team. Lin Fang didn't know if his transmigration and his appearance in the novel had caused a deviation in the original plot. He started to wonder if he had not appeared, then King Feng would have left the place and disappeared. He thought that this must be happening because the original story had not recorded an insignificant person who pretended to be King Feng for 1 or 2 days. He remembered that the culprit who had killed the great prophet had never been found in the novel. He quickly realized that King Feng should have quietly disappeared the day before, and no one would have been able to find him and he would not have reappeared as King Feng. But now, due to his transmigration, a person who was supposed to leave had ended up joining the important mission of finding the sealing object. He also began to wonder if this would change the original ending of the story. He touched his head with both hands and thought that his past life was just garbage. But now that he had transmigrated, he planned to change his destiny and become the protagonist of the world. He never thought it would be so problematic, especially now that the plot was getting out of control. At that moment, he looked to one side and saw Xiaoya in the cafeteria. As he got closer, he saw the Demon King and began to wonder what they were doing. Seeing the two together, he could not help but feel anger, but immediately calmed down and thought that the plot never changed and he was the only one in this world with an omniscient point of view, and was willing to get everything he wanted, since in this life he was the chosen one. The next day, everyone gathered in the main hall of the Awakeners Association headquarters, and everyone stood in a firm position as the president told them that it was imperative for humanity to obtain the sealing object. He assigned Lin Fang as the leader of the team, which was formed by him and 6 other members, and gave them the order to leave immediately. Upon hearing this order, Lin Fang began to walk towards the exit, and then while he was looking at the Demon King, he asked him to wait and watch what was going to happen. The Demon King simply stayed looking at him and smiled. After several hours, they arrived at the place where the sealing object was. This place was full of giant lava demons. As soon as they arrived, they found themselves surrounded in all directions by the lava demons, and they all drew their weapons and prepared to fight. The Demon King started using his magic against the demons, but deep down he knew they were no match for him. He was merely pretending to attack in order to avoid arousing suspicion. On the other hand, Lin Fang did not decide to stay behind, and using his Class S sword he cut a lava demon in half with a precise cut. While everyone kept getting rid of the giant lava demons, which were not stopping from appearing. While Lin Fang was watching the demons, he told his teammates that the demons were not very strong by themselves, but the fact that they were coming one after another was too much. The Demon King thought he was sick in the head because he was working with humans and killing his own demons, but he decided not to think about it anymore and continued pretending. At that moment, he looked at one of Lin Fang's colleagues named Liu Xiaok and was surprised. He was an Awakener just like the other members of the team. He activated his magic and his whole body began to be surrounded by a poisonous aura. Then he unsheathed his sword and, using the poison element, firmly stabbed the sword into the ground, causing the poison to begin to travel through the ground until it reached the lava demons. This attack was so powerful that it even created a large magic shockwave that slowly began to poison and eliminate the giant lava demons. In a matter of seconds, all the giant demons were evaporated, and as Liu Xiaok was sheathing his sword, he sighed and began to deactivate the poison element, causing the poisonous aura surrounding his body to slowly disappear. The Demon King looked towards Liu Xiaok and was amazed, thinking he was quite good. Tian Tian, upon seeing Liu Xiaok's power, was astonished. She praised him by saying that what he had just done was amazing. Liu Xiaok closed his eyes, smiled, and put one hand behind his head and with the other began to greet Tian Tian and explained to her that he was not very good at one-on-one fights, but he defended himself very well against hordes. He also added that someone like him could only be helpful in situations like this. Lin Fang looked at Liu Xiaok and with a smile thought that he had been right. He looked at the others and with a smile revealed to them that he had something special for them. He extended his hand towards Xiaoya and explained to everyone that the artifact they were looking for was ahead. But the terrain was rough and he had no idea if the monsters waiting for them were stronger than them. Additionally, he added that they had been moving non-stop for the past few days, so he asked them to return to the city and rest, while he would go and explore the area in front first. The Demon King remained silent, listening, although deep down he knew that Lin Fang was plotting something. He came to the conclusion that he wanted to find the sealing object to take all the fame for himself. Everyone was confused upon hearing Lin Fang, and Gao Hu told him they couldn't leave, while Xiaoya also advised him not to go alone as he wouldn't be able to confront mortal danger on his own. Liu Xiaok also decided to protest against his idea and told him it wasn't a good idea. Lin Fang simply smiled and explained to them that as the team leader, it was his responsibility, and finding the safest way for the other members to advance safely was the duty of a leader. Everyone was confused and tried to stop him, but he simply turned around and as he was walking away, he told them that he had already made a decision and there was no point in trying to persuade him. As Lin Fang was walking away, the Demon King simply stood there watching without saying anything, and started to wonder what he was up to. Liu Xiaoke clenched his fist and started to cry, thinking that Lin Fang was a very good person. The Demon King looked towards him and was somewhat confused by his attitude. As Lin Fang was walking away, he looked sinisterly towards the others, and with a smile he thought that his plan was working, since he was doing all this for Liu Xiaoke. He was a rising star born in the midst of the demon's den and hardened in the depths of the poisonous caves. Lin Fang thought that in the future Liu Xiaoke would be an SS class ranker and his name would make the whole world tremble. For now, their relationship was merely that of a short-term cooperation, but in the original work, he was the most reliable assistant of the protagonist. Lin Fang would not only obtain the artifact, but also the fate of the future protagonist. Lin Fang would replace him and become the new hero of this world. His unbreakable loyalty made him an important part of the protagonist's path to success. He turned to the others and asked them to wait in the village, because once he returned, they would all continue together. He resumed his journey and bid farewell to everyone. Deep down he knew that only a few people knew where to find the ingredients, but as he remembered the vivid description of the place in the original book, it was going to be very easy for him to find it. And soon Liu Xiaoke was going to become his loyal subordinate. The Demon King stared at Lin Fang walking away, and thought that although he didn't know much about human nature, he felt that he was not a selfless person. Xiaoya turned to the others and told them that she had heard there was an underground auction house not too far away, so she decided to check it out. She told everyone that she would meet them back in the city in a few days. Upon hearing this, Tian Tian also decided to go with her. As Xiaoya walked away from the others, she thought that if King Feng was telling the truth and Lin Fang's soul was being devoured by a demon and was the reason behind his sudden change in personality, then she could not let this happen, and to achieve this goal she had to win the item that could purge souls from the auction. Tian Tian said goodbye to the Demon King and began to follow Xiaoya, and along the way she thought she should bring back the true Lin Fang at any cost. As they were getting away, the Demon King stood watching them. Then Gao Hu caught his attention and told them that now that only the three of them were left, they should do what Lin Fang had told them and return to rest. But at that moment, the Demon King asked him to wait a moment. Upon hearing this, Gao Hu approached him to ask if he had any problem or if he was unhappy with the decision the master had made. While he was glaring aggressively at the Demon King, he thought to himself that if Lin Fang was unhappy with him, it must mean he wasn't a good person. The Demon King looked him in the eyes and with a smile replied that he was deeply moved by team leader Lin Fang's decision to move forward alone, but still couldn't help but worry about him. He asked why they didn't follow him secretly so that if he was in danger, they could help him. Upon hearing this, Gao Hu was surprised and agreed to follow Lin Fang as he was also concerned about him. Liu Xiaoke approached the Demon King and praised him for being a good person, and they both began to flatter him for having good ideas. As Xiaoya and Tian Tian were walking away from them, she overheard the entire conversation and thought that King Feng was genuinely worried about Lin Fang and came to the conclusion that deep down he was a person with a good heart. The Demon King closed his eyes and with a smile asked the two to stop praising him as everything he was doing was for the good of humanity. He looked towards Lin Fang and with a look and a wicked smile began to wonder what his true goal was. Several hours later, in a place where the giant pawns of a chessboard were, Lin Fang arrived at this place, which was the S-rank dungeon called the malicious chessboard. As he was approaching, a chess piece horse moved closer to him and began to look at him aggressively. As he was looking at the pieces, he thought that according to the original book, one of the ingredients was the purification crystal, and this ingredient was somewhere on this chessboard, and unfortunately, he did not know on which piece the ingredient was located. As he was immersed in his thoughts, he began to feel a sense of fear. Slowly he began to turn around and started to wonder where it was coming from. Upon turning around, he saw the red chess piece of the king staring at him with a murderous look, alongside two other pieces that were also giving him a murderous gaze. The king began to charge towards Lin Fang, and upon seeing this, he realized he was in danger and started to flee. The king chess piece activated its magic, causing slowly his spirit to begin taking form. Lin Fang turned towards the king and upon seeing the chess spirit, he was shocked. As the king's spirit was staring at him intently, he began to move his hand towards Lin Fang while a red aura was emanating from his body. Quickly, Lin Fang began to unsheath his sword as he knew he was in danger. The king's spirit attacked him using his palm, and just before the attack could hit him, he drew his sword and struck the king's hand. While he was looking at the king's spirit, his expression changed dramatically as he realized it was very strong. Without thinking twice, he stopped counterattacking and, gaining momentum, stepped back, causing the king's hand to hit the ground. As he was stepping back, a pawn started to stare at him fixedly and quickly positioned himself in his path, causing his body to collide fully with his stone body. Lin Fang was stunned for several seconds and looking up, saw the spirit holding a spear, realizing quickly that it was the spirit of a pawn. The spirit of the pawn attacked him using the lance, but he quickly gained momentum and dodged the attack at the last second and landed on the ground. Looking towards the pawn, he realized he was in danger as he couldn't face the king and the pawn at the same time. At that moment, he felt the presence of someone else, and looking to the other side, he saw the spirit of a furious horse charging towards him at high speed. He took out his Class S weapon called the horse-cutting sword and decided to break the horse's leg to prevent it from charging. He tried to attack the horse's spirit, but in doing so, the spirit was faster and grabbed the blade of his sword with its mouth and split it in two. Little by little, the horse's spirit began to break the blade of his sword into pieces, leaving him with his mouth open to see that his Class S weapon had been destroyed in a single movement. Countless vengeful spirits who had died on this chessboard had their souls devoured by the chess pieces, so that they remained confined forever in this place, turning it into a repetitive cycle and giving rise to an endless battle. All the chess pieces had devoured countless vengeful souls of hunters after their tragic deaths, so now they were much stronger than the Class S demons. While Lin Fang was looking at the spirit of the horse, he took out the wings and he thought he should escape first to return later after devising a plan. He used the wings, causing giant angel wings to appear on his back, and gaining momentum he took a leap and began to fly. And in a matter of seconds he reached the ceiling of the dungeon, and while looking down, the feathers of his wings began to fall slowly, indicating that he had a time limit to use the wings. While flying, the chess pieces started to approach him, and he sheathed his sword and began to look in all directions to find an opening to escape. At that moment, he looked forward and was shocked. In front of him was the spirit of the queen. She raised her arm and with a murderous look she prepared to attack him. The queen's spirit was so powerful that it made Lin Fang seem like an insect. While he was looking at the murderous eyes of the queen's spirit, he began to sweat as he realized that his end was near. The queen's spirit struck Lin Fang forcefully with the palm of her hand, causing his body to crash against the ground. Due to the impact, a large curtain of smoke was created, and once the smoke cleared, Lin Fang appeared lying on the ground, and the angel wings began to disappear. In a matter of seconds, the other giant chess pieces approached him, and as he looked towards the sky, he saw the king's spirit looking aggressively at him. After several seconds, the queen's spirit also approached where Lin Fang was, and the queen's and king's spirits began to look at each other. While he was watching this scene, he thought he was finished, and he began to sweat at the thought that he had no way out. Little by little, the king's spirit began to move his hand towards Lin Fang's body, and as his hand was slowly approaching, he thought that this couldn't be happening. He covered his face with both hands and closed his eyes while thinking that in no way a transmigrator like him was going to die here. But just before the hand of the king's spirit could reach him, a hand surrounded by malignant energy appeared over the king's head. The hand belonged to the demon king himself, and using his power, he shattered the king's chess piece into pieces with just one hand. The stone pieces of the chess piece of the king fell near where Lin Fang was. Upon seeing that he was still alive, he opened his eyes and began to wonder who was the person who had destroyed the spirits that were considered stronger than S-rank demons. Looking around, he saw how the other chess pieces were being destroyed. The demon king was moving at such a high speed that even Lin Fang was not able to see his movements. In the blink of an eye, the demon king destroyed all the chess pieces of the dungeon, leaving Lin Fang in shock, who was unable to understand how a person had been able to destroy all the pieces in an instant. While the pieces of the chess pieces were falling to the ground, Lin Fang slowly began to stand up and started to wonder who was responsible. Liu Xiaok and Gao, who appeared and asked him if he was okay, both helped him stand up, and Lin Fang got mad when he saw them here and asked them what they were doing here. Gao, who looked at him and explained that Bai Qingfeng had been worried about him, and they couldn't help but also be worried, so they decided to secretly follow him to help him in case he was in danger. Liu Xiaok also asked him if he hadn't said he was only going out to explore, and also asked him why he had suddenly tried to challenge the S-class dungeon by himself. He thought it had been too dangerous and thought that thankfully Qingfeng had asked them to follow him. Upon hearing the name Qingfeng, Lin Fang quickly looked to the side and began to wonder if the person who had attacked the spirits of the chess pieces was Qingfeng. In front of him was the demon king, and around him were the remains of the shattered chess pieces. After killing all the spirits, the demon king began to stare at Lin Fang with a murderous look while rotating his wrists. At that moment, all the souls of the hunters that were trapped inside the chess pieces began to emerge from the debris and gathered next to the demon king. Then the soul of a woman handed him a blue crystal. As he was looking at the crystal, he began to wonder if these souls were from the hunters who had been killed by the chess pieces. He took the crystal, and as he was looking at it, he realized that the souls were thanking him for having liberated them, even though they knew he was the demon king. The crystal that the souls had given him was the rare material purification crystal. Lin Fang began to look at him with contempt and thought that the worst scenario had occurred, as the purification crystal had fallen into the hands of the worst possible person. The demon king looked at Lin Fang and began to wonder what he was planning. Lin Fang and the others began to approach him. With a sinister smile and look, the demon king showed the purification crystal to Lin Fang and asked him if he wanted it. He thought to himself that surely his thoughts were written on his face. After showing him the crystal, the demon king set it aside and mocked him while Lin Fang was approaching him. The Demon King smiled and told him that now the crystal belonged to him. He came to the conclusion that although he did not know what his goal was, if this was an object he desired, then it must be good. Gao Hu approached Lin Fang and told him that they were lucky to have Confeng here, and also added that from now on they should work as a team with him. Upon hearing Gao Hu's words, Lin Fang began to get angry and thought that he couldn't stoop to fight against Confeng for the fragment in front of so many people, since he was the person who had obtained it. Although he had saved his life, he thought that he didn't even need his help in the first place, since if he had had a little more time, he would have defeated the king. Lin Fang began to shout and told them that he didn't need anyone to worry about him, leaving Liu Xiaoke and Gao Hu confused. He turned around and started to run away, ordering them to quickly return as he was going to explore this place on his own. Liu Xiaoke and Gao Hu tried to stop him, but he ignored them and kept running, thinking to himself that even if he didn't have the purification crystal, if he gathered the remaining materials, he could still make a semi-finished purification potion. Although the effect of this potion was not as good, it was still enough. The Demon King simply stood there watching without saying a word, and as Lin Fang walked away, he smiled, thinking that the more he tried to hide it, the more he exposed the fact that he had hidden motives. Now he was more determined than ever to find out what he had planned. He decided to simply do what he was doing. Several hours later in the S-class dungeon called the Dry Bones Lake, he advanced and defeated the dungeon boss, and while sitting on its skull, he held the rare material called the Three Flames pill that Lin Fang wanted. He smiled and mocked Lin Fang, asking how he was, seeing that he had the Three Flame pill. Lin Fang began to get angry, then turned around and while cursing at him, he started heading to the next place to search for the next item. He headed towards the Class A dungeon called Bone Cliff, but to his bad luck, the Demon King had arrived before him again, and after defeating the dungeon boss, he obtained the rare material called Dragon Bone Scale. Seeing that he had the Dragon Bone Scale in his hand, Lin Fang began to get angry. Upon reaching the next S-class dungeon called the Abyss of the Wind Whistle, he also encountered the Demon King, who had once again arrived ahead of him and had defeated the dungeon boss. While holding the rare material called Unsalted Water, he looked at Lin Fang and greeted him. Seeing that he had the unsalted water, he put his hands on his head and started screaming because he couldn't contain his anger anymore. As night fell, they arrived at another dungeon, and he exploded with anger because he couldn't even get one of the rare materials, as King Feng had taken them all and he couldn't say anything about it. Seeing that Lin Fang was filled with anger, Gao Hu told him that King Feng was worried about him. As the Demon King held the materials he had found in his hand, he looked at Lin Fang filled with anger and remained silent. Then, as he was looking at the materials, he thought to himself that it was very strange because he didn't know the reason why Lin Fang was trying to get rid of them just to get the materials. He didn't take long to come to the conclusion that these materials were rare and valuable, but he still didn't know why a person who didn't have a shortage of money wanted the materials. While he was distracted, Liu Xiaoke approached to kindly ask him to come with them and help persuade Lin Fang. Upon getting closer, he saw the materials that the Demon King had in hand, and he was amazed as he realized that one of the materials was what he had been desperately searching for all these years. He got excited, and while he was looking at the materials, he asked the Demon King if he could take a look at the materials he had obtained. The Demon King looked him in the eyes and began to doubt if he really should let him take a look at the materials, as he was not sure what his intention was in doing this. This is the end of the video. If you want to see the next part, don't forget to subscribe and comment the word Tian Tian.